Welcome to Life Stories, where we share true, inspiring tales of resilience, love, and unexpected twists in life. Today, we bring you the story of a woman whose perfect wedding day turned into a shocking revelation, turning her life upside down in just a matter of moments. Betrayed by the two people she trusted most, Emily's journey becomes a testament to strength, self-discovery, and the courage to move forward. Stay tuned as we unfold this powerful story of how one woman reclaimed her dignity and embraced a new beginning. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to start today's story with Life Stories. I never imagined my wedding day would start like a fairy tale. I woke up in the Bayview Grand Hotel in San Francisco, my heart racing with excitement as I stretched and looked out over the bay. The air was cool, the sky a pale blue, and the city below seemed to hum with life. It was a picture-perfect day, the kind I had dreamed about since I was little. I was about to marry the man I loved, Mark, and my best friend, Amanda, was by my side as my maid of honor. It all felt so surreal, like I was the lead in my own romantic drama. And as much as I tried to calm my nerves, I couldn't shake the sense that everything in my life had led to this moment of bliss that felt as though it could last forever. I had always been a hopeless romantic, believing in love with an intensity that could sometimes be overwhelming. I suppose that's why I was so captivated by Mark when we met 3 years ago. He was charming, magnetic, and always seemed to make me feel like I was the only one in the room. We met at a hospital fundraiser. He was in pharmaceutical sales, and I had just started my career as a pediatric nurse. We spoke for hours, and by the end of the night, I was convinced I had met someone truly special. Over the next few months, he swept me off my feet with romantic gestures, flowers, and spontaneous dates. He paid attention to the little things, the things I thought only someone who truly loved me would notice. I remember the way he'd call me at odd hours, just to hear my voice. The way he'd tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. It wasn't just the small gestures that made me believe in him, it was how well he fit into my world. Mark got along with my father, Robert, who had been my rock since my mother passed away when I was 12. There was no tension when he met my dad, no awkward silences or attempts to impress. It felt effortless. Robert, a man of few words but great wisdom, seemed to approve of him. Mark knew how to talk about the wines my father loved, the vintages that were Robert's indulgence. I thought that was it. We were perfect for each other, and that everything had fallen into place at the right moment. And so, on that morning, I was full of optimism. I was expecting my first child, 5 months along, and I could hardly wait to become a mother. Mark and I had never discussed children in detail, but when I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. But to my surprise, Mark was ecstatic. His proposal came just days later. A beautiful ring placed gently on my finger as he whispered that I was the one he wanted to build a family with. It felt like a dream come true. I wanted to believe that nothing could ruin this moment. Amanda was my best friend, the one who had seen me through every heartbreak and triumph. We had been inseparable since childhood, sharing secrets, dreams, and a bond that I thought would never be broken. She was my rock, always offering advice when I needed it, supporting me through every tough decision. And when I told her about the pregnancy, she had been thrilled. She'd raised a glass in my honor, saying that I would be the most amazing mother and the most beautiful bride. I remember her smile, warm, genuine, full of love. I never suspected anything was amiss. But as I sat in the bridal suite that morning, getting my hair and makeup done, I began to notice something strange in the air. It was Amanda. She seemed off, just a little, but enough for me to notice. She checked her phone frequently, her smile now a little more forced. It was as if something was weighing on her. I didn't question it, after all. Weddings could make anyone nervous. But looking back, I should have seen the signs. We were all getting ready in the suite, the photographer snapping photos, the bridesmaids chatting nervously as they adjusted their dresses. Everything was chaotic in a beautiful way, the kind of chaos that only happens before the most important moment of your life. Amanda, ever the planner, Had been helping organize the timeline for the day, giving orders with the precision of someone who had it all figured out. Yet there was a flicker of tension in her demeanor that I couldn't place. She was acting strange, but I thought I was imagining things. After all, the most important thing in my life was about to happen. How could anything go wrong? Little did I know, my world was about to come crashing down in a way I could never have anticipated. A waiter appeared at the door with a note for me, which seemed odd. He was nervous, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly as he passed it to Emma, one of my bridesmaids, who brought it to me. I thought it would be a sweet message from Mark, perhaps something about how much he loved me. But when I opened it, my heart stopped. It wasn't a love note. It was a warning, a message from Jake, the waiter, telling me he had seen something he thought I needed to know. His message was short and simple, but it made my blood run cold. I think you should know what I just saw in the men's bathroom. Second floor, your fiancé and maid of honor. I'm sorry, Michael. I read it again, and again. My hands trembled, my breath quickened, and for a moment, the room seemed to close in around me. I wanted to believe it was a joke. I wanted to ignore it, to chalk it up to some mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was wrong, deeply, profoundly wrong. I stood up, feeling the weight of the note in my hand. And I told the makeup artist to keep going. I just need a moment, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I walked out of the suite, feeling like I was in a daze. The world felt distant and blurry, as though I was outside of it, watching my life unfold from afar. When I stepped into the hallway, Jake was waiting. His face was full of concern, but his eyes were full of sincerity. I wish this were a joke, he said quietly, but I thought you deserved to know. He led me down a service corridor and up a back stairwell, my heart pounding harder with every step. My hand instinctively went to my baby bump as though to protect the life growing inside me from the pain I was about to experience. We stopped in front of a door marked men's bathroom. Jake pointed silently, confirming that they were still inside. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but when I approached the door and saw through the crack in the bathroom mirror, my world shattered. There they were, Mark and Amanda, entwined in a way I had never imagined. Amanda was perched on the counter, her legs wrapped around Mark, who stood in front of her with a smirk on his face. They were talking about how they would keep up the charade until the wedding was over. How they'd pretend to be the loving friends and partners for just a little while longer. I could barely breathe as their voices echoed in my ears. Just a few more hours, Mark said, his voice smooth, like he was speaking about a business deal. After the wedding, we'll stick to the plan. I couldn't hold back the gasp that threatened to escape, but I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle it. I recorded the conversation with shaking hands, documenting every word, every betrayal. I was frozen in place, unable to move or speak as I watched the two people I trusted more than anyone destroy everything I had believed in. The rest of that morning passed in a blur. My world had cracked wide open, and nothing would ever be the same again. I left the bathroom, my mind racing. I had a plan now. There would be no wedding today. Instead, I would expose them both for who they truly were. But as I walked back to the bridal suite, I forced myself to put on the mask of calm. My father was waiting for me, and I couldn't let him see the storm brewing inside me, not yet. But inside, I knew that today, I would take control of my life. Today would mark the beginning of a new chapter. I returned to the bridal suite with a strange calmness in my movements, as though my mind had already shifted into autopilot. I could feel the weight of the phone in my hand, still recording the incriminating evidence of Mark and Amanda's betrayal. The faces of my bridesmaids, my father, and the makeup artist blurred as I entered the room. The whole suite seemed to buzz with a sense of anticipation, but it felt distant, like I was watching my own life through a fogged window. Amanda, always so composed, was standing by the window, her phone clutched in her hands. She turned when I walked in, her smile too bright, too rehearsed. "There you are," she exclaimed, her voice high-pitched in an attempt to cover the tension that was simmering just below the surface. I was just about to go looking for you. I nodded in response, keeping my face blank. I just needed a moment to breathe. I'm fine. The others didn't seem to notice the subtle shift in the air. The makeup artist continued her work, and the bridesmaids adjusted their dresses. But there was something in my gaze, something that Amanda clearly recognized, that caused her to falter for a fraction of a second. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a tight smile, turning away to check her phone again. I couldn't hold on to my facade any longer. I needed to do something. I needed to act before they had a chance to ruin everything I had built up in my life. I couldn't just walk away quietly. And I certainly couldn't pretend everything was okay. They had underestimated me, and now it was my turn to take control. I had already sent the video to Jake's phone. He had promised me that he would take care of everything, and he was ready to help me expose their lies in front of everyone. I had a plan, and there was no turning back now. As the final touches were made to my hair and makeup, I took a deep breath, my heart still racing in my chest, but with a renewed sense of purpose. I could feel my baby kick inside me, as though the little one was telling me to go on. And in that moment, I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to cancel this wedding. I was going to make sure that everyone knew the truth. The ceremony was just about to begin. My father came in to check on me, his face full of concern. He didn't know yet. He couldn't know. This was my fight, and I needed to handle it on my own terms. I took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice soft but full of pride. I nodded, more ready than I've ever been. His eyes softened, and for a moment, he just stood there, looking at me as though he could see through the layers of calm I had built up. He knew something was different, but he said nothing. He trusted me, and I needed that trust more than anything. We walked down the aisle together, and I tried to focus on the steps ahead. I needed to act normal, to look like I was just another bride on her wedding day. But inside, I was already counting down the moments until I could take control. As we reached the altar, Mark stood there with that same smile, the one he had worn for 3 years, the one that had melted my heart every time I saw it. But now, it was just a mask, a carefully constructed facade. I felt nothing but disdain for the man I had once loved so deeply. I couldn't even bring myself to look at him. Instead, I focused on the officiant and the words of the ceremony, trying to suppress the fury that bubbled up inside me. I could feel my father's hand on mine, a steady anchor in the storm. And then it came, the moment I had been dreading, yet anticipating. The officiant turned to Mark first, asking him to share his vows. His words came out smoothly, rehearsed, but I could see the cracks starting to form. He was trying so hard to keep up the illusion that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I promise to be the husband and father that you both deserve," Mark said, his voice full of sincerity that made my skin crawl. "To build a life of love, trust, and respect." His words hung in the air, empty and hollow. The reality of the situation was far from what he was claiming. But I stayed silent, my smile never wavering as the crowd hung on to every word. When he finished, he reached for my hand, his touch cold and possessive. Now it was my turn. The officiant turned to me, and I could feel all eyes on me. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. It was time. I didn't need to play along any longer. This wedding was a farce, and it was about to end in front of everyone. I looked out over the guests, their faces expectant and full of love for a wedding they thought was perfect. I had once believed it too. I had once believed in Mark, in Amanda, in the life we had planned together. But all of that was about to change. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady and clear, though my heart was pounding. "I'd like to share something with you all." At that moment, I looked over at Jake, who was discreetly positioned near the back of the venue. He gave me the nod I was waiting for. I smiled faintly, a cold, determined smile. "I'd like to share something special with all of you." The screens that had been showing romantic images and gentle quotes flickered for a moment before changing. The familiar image of Mark and Amanda in the bathroom appeared on the screens, their voices crystal clear through the sound system. How much longer do we have to keep this charade up? Amanda's voice echoed throughout the venue. I'm tired of being the supportive best friend when I should be the one wearing that dress. Gasps erupted from the guests. Mark's face drained of color as he watched himself on screen. I stood still, my heart calm now, my mind clear. I had finally taken control. The man I thought I would marry, the man I had trusted, was nothing but a liar. And Amanda, my best friend, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. As the video continued, I watched Mark and Amanda's plans unravel in front of everyone. The words they spoke about exploiting my father's business connections, about using me for their own gain, were so callous, so heartless, that I couldn't comprehend how they had managed to deceive me for so long. When the video ended, the silence in the room was deafening. I turned to face the guests, my voice steady but full of strength. As you can see, I said quietly, I will not be marrying Mark today. And with that, everything changed. The wedding was over. The silence that followed felt like a heavy weight, pressing down on everyone in the room. I could hear the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions swirling in the pavilion. My gaze never wavered from Mark as he stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I held it in check, focusing instead on the overwhelming sense of clarity that had taken over me. The truth had come to light, and there was no going back. My father, Robert, stood beside me, his expression a mixture of shock and quiet fury. He hadn't seen the video, but he knew something had changed. His protective instincts kicked in, and I could see his muscles tense as he moved a step closer to me, as if to shield me from whatever might come next. Mark, clearly realizing that everything he had built up was crumbling, tried to recover. His mouth moved, but no words came out at first. Then, as if a switch had flipped, he took a step toward me, his hand outstretched. Emily, this isn't what it looks like. He started, his voice thick with desperation. Please, let's talk about this. I took a step back, my eyes narrowing at him. The man who had promised me a life of love and devotion was standing there, trying to manipulate the situation, trying to twist the truth into something it wasn't. His words, once so sweet, now tasted like ash in my mouth. No, Mark, I said, my voice icy. There's nothing to talk about. I've heard everything I need to hear. The guests, still reeling from the shocking video, exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them began to look away, unsure of how to react. Others, including Mark's friends, appeared uncomfortable, their eyes shifting between him and the scene unfolding in front of them. It was clear that some of them had known, or at least suspected, the truth, but that wasn't important anymore. What mattered now was me, and the life that I was about to bring into the world. Mark reached for me again, his hand trembling, his voice pleading. Emily, please, think about the baby. This can't be the way it ends. I could feel the bile rise in my throat as he used my child as a pawn in his game. I had never felt more disgusted in my life. Don't you dare, I said, my voice low but filled with venom. Don't you dare use my child against me. You lost the right to talk about my baby when you called it an unfortunate complication. I could see the color drain from Mark's face at my words. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, I turned away from him. I didn't need to hear his excuses anymore. His true self had been exposed, and I wasn't going to allow him to try and gaslight me into believing his lies. Robert, who had remained silent up until this point, stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of years of wisdom and protection. I think you should leave now, Mark, my father said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mark hesitated, his eyes darting between my father and me, but he could see the finality in our expressions. Slowly, he turned, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He left the pavilion, pushing past guests who stood in stunned silence. It was over, but just as the crowd began to murmur, Vanessa, my supposed best friend, made her move. She stepped forward, her face twisted with a mixture of defiance and guilt. She looked at me with that familiar plastic smile, trying to save face in front of everyone. But I could see through it. "Oh, come on, Emily," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "It's not like he ever really loved you anyway. You trapped him with that pregnancy. You knew what you were doing." My blood ran cold at her words. This wasn't the woman I had called my best friend for so many years. This was a stranger. Someone who had used me just as much as Mark had. I couldn't believe I had let her in so close. Trusted her with everything. I looked at her, the hurt and betrayal written all over my face. But I didn't allow myself to dwell on it. I had learned something today, a lesson that would carry me through for the rest of my life. "Is that what you think?" I asked softly, my voice steady despite the pain gnawing at my insides. "That I trapped him? That I was some naive fool who didn't know what was going on?" Vanessa faltered, her composure cracking just a little as she realized the truth was staring her in the face. I didn't need to say anything more. The silence that stretched between us spoke volumes. "You're just as much a pawn in his game as I was," I added, my voice quiet but full of conviction. "And you're going to have to live with that." Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stood there, trembling, unsure of what to say next. But there was nothing she could say to make up for the years of manipulation and lies. I turned away from her, walking toward the exit. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me. But I didn't care. I was done with all of it. As I walked, I caught sight of my father, who had been standing quietly by my side, his face full of pride and concern. He stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Liv," he said quietly, using the nickname he'd always called me. "You've always been strong, but today, you were extraordinary." I couldn't help but smile up at him. Despite everything that had happened, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. I wasn't going to let this ruin me. I wasn't going to let their betrayal define me. I was moving forward, stronger than ever. With my father, my baby, and my friends by my side. We walked into the reception together, the sounds of music and laughter beginning to rise up around us. The guests who had remained were starting to shift, finding their way back to the celebration. It wasn't the day I had planned, but it was my day. And for the first time, I was beginning to see it for what it truly was, a new beginning. As we entered the reception hall, I felt the weight of the past few hours lifting off my shoulders. Today had been the day I'd finally found my voice. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of something even bigger. As the evening unfolded, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find. The guests had shifted their focus, no longer watching the painful scene that had occurred earlier, but instead joining in the celebration of what truly mattered, new beginnings. My father, Emma, Rachel, and the few guests who had stayed gathered around me, offering words of encouragement, support, and love, despite the unexpected turn of events. This wasn't a day of mourning, it was a day of strength, resilience, and hope. The music played on, and as the sun set over the bay, I realized that the path ahead, though uncertain, was one I would walk with my head held high. My baby kicked again, a gentle reminder that this little one, my new beginning, would be the one to shape my future now. I was no longer defined by the betrayal or the past. I was shaping my own story. As I stood with my father, surrounded by my true friends, I made a promise to myself. I would raise my child in a life full of love, honesty, and authenticity, something I had never truly had before. The future was mine to create, and I knew I was ready. Thank you for watching this incredible story of strength, resilience, and new beginnings. If you enjoyed this true life story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos about powerful transformations and life stories. Stay strong, stay authentic, and we'll see you in our next episode.